Welcome to another team selection video ahead of Game Week 35 in FPL. We just got the announcement that Manchester City's double against Wolves away has now fallen under Game Week 36, which was predicted in the last week or two. So we're going to talk about that, the best Manchester City assets to buy, as well as my team selection for Game Week 35 and how I did in Double Game Week 34. At least so far, we still have that Manchester United versus Chelsea fixture to go. So far, I've scored 61 points, and that includes Weghorst's assist and his 5-pointer coming off my bench for Fabian Schär. And Reece James was in full training yesterday, so we would expect him to start against Manchester United, but you just never know. And he has been a bit of a frustrating player, to say the least. Only 1 point since Game Week 31 when I brought him in, for example, and a lot of others did the exact same thing. So with Reece James, he had no injury, but Tuchel was managing him because he just came back from one a few weeks ago and he played 3 games in a row, including 120 minutes against Real Madrid in the Champions League. So it is understandable, but still very frustrating nonetheless. And I will talk about Reece James when I talk about my Game Week 35 plan specifically. But Jose Sarr in goal, no difference between him and Ramsdale, both scoring 3 points, accumulating enough saves to get that, as well as only conceding 1 goal. But Wolves are very, very poor at the moment. They've just not gotten the results, and their assets overall have been shocking, to say the least. Fabian Schär, it's a big shame because Newcastle rotated a lot, and Fabian Schär was part of that, but they still won 3-0 away to Norwich, so I didn't get any points from that fixture, despite signing Timo Pukki into my team, and he was on the back of 2 returns in a row. He's been one of the best strikers in recent times, but I'm not too surprised that he blanked here. I still would expect him to do well in the run-in, but then again, you look at how much Newcastle rotate, and for Norwich not to really cause them any problems, it's quite alarming. But then again, they're going to be going down to the Championship, which is a shame. This week I was carried by my Liverpool players, so Robertson got the goal, the clean sheet and the 3 bonus points, so very happy with him. Trent picked up a yellow card, otherwise he probably would have been in for some bonus points himself, and those 2 and Matip have just proven to be amazing FPL options. Van Dijk is still very good, but I think the other 3 I just mentioned are even better. And I still prefer Robertson and Trent, and I think they're worth that extra 2 million or 3 in Trent's case over Matip, but he is a bonus points machine, and the Cameroonian has been ever present in Liverpool's defence in the Premier League, and Konate has been playing in the Champions League. We'll see how they line up today against Villarreal. And Reece James, of course, he missed out, as I discussed before. Mason Mount is my captain. I made a late switch between Salah to Mason Mount, and that might have backfired. Let's see if Mason Mount, if he gets a clean sheet and, he just gets appearance points for 60 plus minutes, then he matches Salah and it's not too bad. And I'd be pretty happy with that overall. Bukayo Saka so far is my second highest scoring player in my team, and I never really considered him for the captaincy, but at one point, depending on which side I went in terms of my transfer plans heading into Game Week 34, I was even considering benching him, but I always said I would have been very uncomfortable with doing so, looking at how bad United are, and he was operating on Tellez' side, and he's been awful recently. So very happy to have kept him, to have made transfers that enabled me to start Bukayo Saka. And as mentioned before, Salah did get that assist and he got 6 points overall, so not too bad from him, and all of my Liverpool players returned points. Heung-min Son and Kulusevski, though, have been poor in the last 2 game weeks, and Spurs haven't registered a single shot on target in over 2 weeks, which is quite alarming, and that's in 3 hours worth of football pretty much. And Timo Pukki, my new signing, did blank unfortunately, but still pretty happy with it overall. Let's see how Mason Mount does in the second game, and if Reece James starts tomorrow against Manchester United. Broja, very disappointing, he didn't even start the game, and hopefully Reece James features, otherwise Broja will have to come off the bench with a 1-pointer. So my squad depth is actually pretty poor at the moment, with Doherty out for the rest of the season, and then I've got the likes of Broja, who have just been very poor. I don't even mind keeping Weghorst, but if I were to make a move up front to fund other moves, Weghorst would be the one that needs to make way, and unfortunately I wouldn't be able to get rid of Broja instead. But that's how my team did in Game Week 34 so far, and now let's move on to my Game Week 35 team selection without any transfers. Just like last week, I think I would go for Jose Sarr just about over Aaron Ramsdale, and I don't really expect a clean sheet for either team, just like I said heading into Game Week 34 really, although Wolves were more likely on paper. And when you're looking at Ramsdale, it's a bit of an interesting one because he hasn't really kept a clean sheet in a very long time. Obviously Arsenal kept one in his absence with Bernd Leno deputising there, but with Jose Sarr, he also hasn't been that good recently. I can't even remember the last time Wolves kept a clean sheet, and they've been very shaky, especially ever since blank Game Week 30 when they conceded 3 to Leeds, and that red card changed the game completely. But It's very tough. I don't really expect anything there from my goalkeepers, but West Ham should rotate quite a bit, especially if they're trailing or they're in a really precarious situation in the Europa League against Frankfurt on Thursday. We'll find out more, and then maybe that could open up the possibility of David Moyes benching the likes of Jarrod Bowen again, Declan Rice, Mikel Antonio, and a few others, just like they did against Chelsea, and they were pretty solid defensively, I will say, in that game. They were a bit unlucky not to get away with a draw, but now they have no fit centre-back, with Craig Dawson being suspended, getting that red card, leading to the Jorginho penalty. Bukayo Saka, I think he should be fine. He picked up a knock heading into the United game, so he had that from the Chelsea match, and he should be fine, I think, but you just never know. Keep an eye on the situation. It's never nice to see a player in your team with a yellow flag, but I personally think he will be alright, and he's just too important for Arsenal to miss out, especially with what's at stake for the Gunners. And I would like Arsenal from an offensive point of view, not necessarily from a defensive point of view, so not much has changed, even with the injuries to West Ham. Saka against Masuaku should be a good battle, and Saka you would expect to come out on top, but you never know in football. Robertson and Trent away to Newcastle. Looks good on paper, but actually Newcastle are one of the informed teams in the league, and actually I think in recent games Newcastle have the best home record other than Liverpool, so that should be interesting. I would expect Liverpool to still win the game, but I wouldn't be surprised if Newcastle cause some problems and potentially score a goal or two there. Reece James away to Everton. As I said in my last video, I expect Reece James to start against Man United and Everton actually. But heading into Double Gameweek 36, would you expect Reece James to start both of those on top of Gameweek 34 and 35? I'm not so sure, and that's why in my transfer tips video, I did say that Reece James for me is worth selling, especially to the likes of Robertson, Trent and Cancelo. And now with that double in 36 for Manchester City, even Laporte could be a very good substitute. Alonso as well is looking more nailed on and a better option than Reece James. So I'm not sure what to do with Reece James just yet. I'm going to see what happens against Man United. If he doesn't start once again, yes, he probably will against Everton, but that's just going to be probably the final nail in the coffin, and I'll get rid of him, and I'll talk about which players I'm looking at myself in a little while. As for the midfield, I think Salah as my captain is the way I'm going to be going, but Son at home to Leicester would be pretty intriguing. And actually, looking at Harry Kane's record, 16 goals in 13 games against Leicester, it's his favourite opponent. If I had Harry Kane, I'd probably captain him this week. And other than De Bruyne, I think Kane would probably be at the very top of my list. Kulusevski as well at home to Leicester. Some Spurs fans think that Emerson Royal could be dropped and Kulusevski will play a more defensive role, maybe as a wing-back. That could be the case, but I do think that Spurs will suffer a bit more offensively if they take out one of the inform attackers and put him into a more defensive role personally, but you just never know, and Spurs can still find a way of overturning their situation, dropping 5 points of the last 6 available to them to the likes of Brighton and Brentford. And at home to Leicester, look, it looks like a tough fixture, but I honestly think Spurs will probably win this game, and I expect Son and Harry Kane to do very well, and Leicester could rotate quite a lot, just like I talked about with West Ham. The Conference League fixture against Roma, Jose Mourinho's Roma, is going to be very tough for Leicester, and that's going to be the priority. So ultimately, I'm just not too sure if they're going to play a strong team against Tottenham. I wish they did, and I hope they do, but there's no guarantee of that happening whatsoever. The likes of Maddison could be benched there. And then Mount away to Everton. I actually don't mind him for this game, but at the same time, I need to see a bit more from him, obviously. And he blanked against West Ham, didn't really have a great game. Heading into that United fixture, I would expect a return, but away to Everton, that's still a really good fixture. But will Chelsea start to rotate against Leeds or maybe Everton? That is a possibility, and that could also play a part in my thinking in terms of the defender replacement for Reece James if I decide to offload the wing-back. And then looking up front, we've got Weghorst away to Watford. He's got decent form actually, despite not returning. I don't know how he didn't return in the second game of Double Gameweek 33 with a very glorious chance, but he did return in the other game of 33 and also in Gameweek 34 with that assist. And honestly, how many forwards can you really back and say they're consistent and they're worth selling Weghorst for? Not that many. Ivan Toney, I've said before. Nketiah could be an interesting option. Emmanuel Dennis for the double. Richarlison, Watkins for their back-to-back doubles in 36 and 37. Jesus could be someone to consider, but I would keep an eye on him for now. And once his minutes are more secure and he gets more consistent rhythm and confidence, that's when I would consider going for the Brazilian. But right now, I just don't know if it's worth it. And then there's obviously Harry Kane and a few others. But ultimately, I'm quite happy to keep Weghorst. But what I am considering is downgrading him to a Greenwood, to a Gelhardt, or even a Dobbin, any kind of 4.5 million option to then give me enough money to make the other moves I want in my team. And then Pukki, I just signed him. I'm not going to consider getting rid of him already. I still think he's a good option, especially in Double Gameweek 36. And he's got good fixtures to round up the season. And then I've got Broja, Schär and Doherty on my bench. So a very weak bench, I will have to say, especially in this week, and that's why I want to make some changes. Yet if I get rid of Weghorst, I will be downgrading him to someone that's even worse than him. So my squad depth is going to be an issue, especially if I want to get these Manchester City players in. So that is going to be a bit of a dilemma. In terms of the captaincy, I'm still quite open-minded to maybe go for Heung-min Son. I would expect him to bounce back, but it's a bit of a tough one. At the moment, I'm leaning towards Salah, and actually Saka could be an interesting differential captaincy away to West Ham, where he's going to be up against Masuaku and a depleted West Ham side, especially if they rotate even more due to their Europa League commitments. Now I'm going to show you my transfer plans, what I'm thinking of, but right now it's all kind of 50-50, and I'm very open-minded. I'm going to see what happens in the Chelsea-Man United game, and then throughout the week, see what happens, any injury news, and then finalise my team for good. So as things stand, I have a few options. In Game Week 35, I could get rid of Reece James already and go for another Chelsea defender like Marcos Alonso, who would be at the very top of my list, even over the likes of Antonio Rudiger. But with that City double in 36, facing Newcastle at home and Wolves away, I am actually considering a move to Emerick Laporte. Joao Cancelo is the ideal one, but I don't have enough money to do a like-for-like replacement from Reece James to Cancelo. That would require the downgrade from Weghorst to Greenwood already, and I don't think that's worth a -4 this week. I wouldn't be surprised if Leeds score. They've been in good form recently, so that's a bit of a difficult one. And I do like Alonso a lot, but I actually prefer the City defenders even more so, and that includes the likes of Laporte. So that's going to be an interesting one. I think City just have more to play for, and also they're a better team, better defensively, and in terms of fixtures, you could argue they're even better than Chelsea's, although they're both very good. So that's something I need to think about. And if I decide to go for one of these players I just mentioned, do I go for them in Game Week 35 or 36? So the bottom line is, if Reece James doesn't start against Manchester United, I will probably sell him to either Alonso or Laporte this week, and that will probably be quite nailed on to happen. But if Reece James starts, I can maybe afford to keep him, play him against Everton. I think he would start that one as well. And then heading into Double Game Week 36, I would then have the dilemma of potentially getting rid of him then. So let's say, for example, James starts tomorrow as I expect. I will keep things as they are, roll the transfer, captain either Salah or Son as I said before, and then move on to Double Game Week 36. And heading into that period, that's where I'd really want to target that Manchester City team. So what I could do here is, for example, go from Reece James to Joao Cancelo, and then Doherty could become Emerick Laporte. But once again, if we look at our budget here in FPL.team, I would need 1.7 million more in order to fund those moves, and then Weghorst could become Greenwood or Gelhardt. I probably would just go for Greenwood, just because whenever he's made a cameo off the bench, he's actually made an impact, and if I ever need him, he could maybe do something for me, but it doesn't really matter anyway. You could just go for the cheapest option available to you, like Dobbin or someone else around 4.5 million, and then my team will look something like this, and then I would bench Greenwood, and this will look pretty solid. Double City defence. The only problem really, and I really want someone in midfield from Manchester City, I think De Bruyne is a really big piece. You know, I think he's a great differential. Those of you on the wild card, I'd easily go to him now. Yes, he might be benched against Leeds, but still, I would expect him to start the vast majority of these Premier League games left to be had. And to be honest, if he started all of them, I wouldn't be surprised. City are still going to be entirely focused on the Premier League and Champions League, and they don't have any other commitments. Liverpool obviously have the FA Cup final to also think about, but I still think Manchester City will go very strong and rarely rotate. I know there's this kind of conception of Pep Roulette being a really big thing, and of course it is at times, but they have too much at stake to really be messing around a lot, even if they're facing Leeds away or Chelsea at home. Whoever it may be, I still think City will go strong. So the big problem, I think, in my team is not having De Bruyne. I think he's that type of differential who can push you up the ranks and get you to the ultimate position you really want to be in. As you can see, with these transfers, I have 0.1 million remaining, and this would be for a -4 hit because I would have 2 free transfers heading into Double Game Week 36, and I would make an additional transfer to have 3 overall, and that would be a -4. So this still looks pretty good. But I'll say this right now, if I had De Bruyne heading into 36, I'd actually be tempted to captain him over Salah, Son, Kane, whoever it may be. And I think he's that good of an option right now. Have him in UCL Fantasy, I just brought him in. He's been so good. Gabriel Jesus up front, if he gets consistent minutes, he could also be a great option. But how would I narrow it down in terms of the best City assets? I personally would rather double up on the defence and go for these two, Laporte and Cancelo. Diaz is still pretty good. Walker, if he comes back from injury, is also fine, but I think Laporte and Cancelo are the pick of the bunch, and if you can afford it, I would go for Joao Cancelo, but it's not the end of the world, and Laporte can be a good substitute for him if you're not able to have the funds. And then De Bruyne in midfield for me is an easy one. If you can't afford De Bruyne, then I would just go for Phil Foden. I don't trust Mahrez's minutes in the Premier League, but in UCL Fantasy, that's a different story, of course. And then there's also a few others like Sterling. They could explode in certain game weeks, but I just don't think they offer the consistency of minutes and also the consistency captaincy and performances to really warrant that price, and I'd even rather go for Heung-min Son over Sterling. So therefore, I think the triple up you want in City, if you are going there, maybe on the wild card or with free transfers, is Laporte, Cancelo and Kevin De Bruyne. Another one to consider for me is Gabriel Jesus up front, but once again, it all depends on if he gets consistent minutes from now on. He played in the Champions League, so I'm not too sure if he will start against Leeds. That will be a bit of a concern. Maybe it will be Sterling instead who starts in that game. You just never know. But City have so many options that I don't think they will miss him too much, despite Jesus' really good form right now. And then Ederson in goal. If you really want a goalkeeper who plays in one of the best teams in the league, if not the best, especially defensively, I think Ederson's just a fine option. Of course, it's a lot of money to spend on a goalkeeper, especially one that doesn't really accumulate too many bonus points or saves, but he's still a fine option and quite dependable, and him and Alisson will keep the most clean sheets this season for sure, and I would rather go for Laporte and Cancelo if I had to pick out of those lot. But ultimately, those are the three City assets I would mainly go to, and if you can't afford one or two, I'd go for Foden instead of De Bruyne, and maybe instead of Cancelo, you could go for Diaz as well instead. But that's kind of my thinking in terms of the City assets. I could go for double City defence. I would really love De Bruyne, but unfortunately it would require an additional hit. So I can show you an example here. Joao Cancelo, instead of getting him, unfortunately, I'd have to get Marcos Alonso, and then I can take a -8 and do Heung-min Son to Kevin De Bruyne. So that is the alternative. I'm just not too sure if it's worth taking Son out ahead of a double game week where he could still do very well despite the tough fixtures for a -8 for Kevin De Bruyne. Despite how good De Bruyne is, I just don't know if it's worth it. But if I decide to go down this route and be more aggressive, I think De Bruyne would be my captain. It's just a shame I can't afford Cancelo as well. But Alonso isn't a bad choice, and I think right now he is the best Chelsea defender, especially with Reece James having his minutes managed. Let me know what you think of this team down in the comment section below, and who do you think is the best captain heading into Game Week 35 as well as Game Week 36. I personally think De Bruyne is probably the best in both weeks, but there is still the possibility that he is rested in one of these three matches. Although FPL.team haven't updated it yet, Wolves obviously have that double against Manchester City, so it'd be Chelsea away and Manchester City at home. I would still start Ramsdale over Jose Sarr. Ideally, I would get Kasper Schmeichel. I think he's got a great double, and despite Leicester's defensive troubles, they are still offering probably the best goalkeeper in the game right now in Schmeichel, due to the sheer lack of options in my opinion. But still, I don't think it's worth an additional hit to go for a goalkeeper transfer when I already have two goalkeepers that are doubling, and I still wouldn't actually mind having Ramsdale until the end of the season, especially with Tomiyasu returning. I think Arsenal could shore things up at the back a little bit. I wouldn't expect a clean sheet against Tottenham, but against Leeds, despite their form, I still think it's possible, and it's not something that's out of the ordinary. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it useful, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss a single upload or stream. It'd be much appreciated, and it helps out with the algorithm. All the best of luck for Double Gameweek 34. There's still one game left, and also Gameweek 35. And let me know what your plans are. Which tips do you have left, and when are you planning on using them? As I've said before, I probably would use the bench boost in 36 if I still had it. I'd use the free hit in 37, and then I'd probably use a triple captain, for example, maybe in 38 or 35. Or you could free hit in 38 and then use the triple captaincy on a double gimmick player in 37. There's different ways to go about it, but I ultimately would go for something like that. For those of you with 2 free hits left, I'd probably consider using one now in 35 and then in 37, because you can't use it in back-to-back game weeks. So bear that in mind. All the best of luck. Enjoy the football as always. Also in UCL Fantasy, let me know how you're doing in that as well. There's going to be F1 Fantasy content on the channel as highly requested, and also there could be gaming content on this channel during the summer. Let me know if you want to see that. Take care as always. I hope you have a lot of fun and have a great week, and I'll see you next time.